I love very much the voices in general, and I consider me very privileged because I can sing next to the best voice, like Celine Dion, like Luciano Pavarotti.
His voice could move mountains. Andrea Bocelli, the blind tenor from Italy, didn't just sing music, he lived it. His performances brought millions to tears. His duets with stars like Celine Dion and Sarah Brightman became legendary, and his story of triumph over blindness inspired generations. But behind that angelic voice lies a life filled with unimaginable pain. Loss, heartbreak, and health struggles have followed Bocelli every step of the way. And even at 66, the truth about his life reveals a man who's endured more than most could bear. How did one of the most gifted singers of all time rise from tragedy, only to face new heartbreaks later in life? This is the untold, devastating truth of Andrea Bocelli, a man whose pain gave birth to some of the most beautiful music the world has ever known. Born into a world that didn't believe in him. Andrea Bocelli was born on September 22, 1958, in the small Tuscan village of Lajatico, Italy. But his story almost ended before it began. When his mother was pregnant, doctors urged her to terminate the pregnancy, warning that her child would be born with severe disabilities. She refused, choosing love and faith over fear. That decision would give the world one of its greatest voices. Andrea was born partially blind due to congenital glaucoma. As a child, he could still see light and shadows, but his world was already limited. Yet even then, there was something special about him, something unshakable. Music became his refuge. His parents noticed that while he struggled with sight, he had an extraordinary ear for sound. He could recognize melodies after hearing them just once, and by age 6, he was learning the piano, flute, and saxophone by touch. But at the age of 12, tragedy struck. During a soccer game, Andrea was hit in the head by a ball, causing a brain hemorrhage that left him completely blind. Overnight, the little light he had left was gone forever. For most, that would have been the end of hope, but for Andrea, it was the beginning of something divine. He once said, "I think God gave me this disability to push me toward the path I am on today." Still, the pain of losing his sight never fully left him, and it became a theme that quietly shaped his life and art. How did this blind boy from Tuscany find the strength to chase an impossible dream? The music that saved his soul. After losing his sight, Andrea could have given in to despair. Instead, he turned to music, his only escape. He spent hours at the piano, losing himself in melodies that became his lifeline. While other children played outside, Andrea dreamed of opera houses, of singing on stages he could never see, but could imagine in perfect detail. He idolized great tenors like Franco Corelli and Luciano Pavarotti. In fact, he began to imitate their vocal techniques by ear, teaching himself the craft of opera with no formal training. But success didn't come easily. For years, Bocelli performed in bars and restaurants, singing pop songs to make ends meet. His voice was powerful, but the world didn't seem ready for a blind opera singer from a small Italian town. Then, in 1992, fate intervened. Italian rock star Zucchero Fornaciari was recording a demo of a song called Miserere, originally written for Pavarotti. When Pavarotti heard Bocelli's voice on the demo, he was stunned. He reportedly said, "Who is this man? This is no ordinary singer." That moment changed everything. Bocelli was invited to tour with Zucchero and soon signed to a major label. Within just a few years, he went from performing in cafes to sold-out opera houses and world tours. But as his fame grew, so did the weight of expectation and the pressure of balancing music, family, and health. Would Bocelli's newfound fame bring him happiness? Or would it uncover even deeper pain? Love and loss. At the height of his early success, Andrea found love with Enrica Cenzati, a woman who saw beyond his blindness and into his heart. The two married in 1992 and had two sons, Amos and Matteo. For a while, it seemed like a fairy tale: a talented singer, a loving wife, and a growing family. But as his career exploded, so did the strain on their relationship. Endless travel, rehearsals, and fame began to take their toll. By 2002, the marriage had quietly fallen apart. Bocelli rarely speaks publicly about the divorce, but those close to him say it was one of the darkest periods of his life. Despite the separation, he remained devoted to his children, and to this day, his family remains close. His son Matteo would later follow in his footsteps, performing a duet with his father on Fall on Me, a song that became a powerful symbol of love between father and son. Yet even in music, heartbreak lingered. Bocelli poured his pain into every note, singing as if each word carried the weight of his past. He once said, "To sing beautifully, you must feel the pain of life. Otherwise, the music has no soul." But just when it seemed like the darkness would consume him, a new light appeared. One that would change his life once again. Who was the woman who helped Andrea Bocelli find hope after heartbreak? The second chance at love. In 2002, the same year his marriage ended, Andrea met Veronica Berti, a young woman who would soon become his partner, manager, and greatest source of strength. Veronica was only 18 when they met, but their connection was undeniable. She brought warmth, energy, and stability back into Andrea's life. For years, the two worked side by side. She managed his tours, handled his schedule, and helped him navigate fame with grace. In 2012, they welcomed their daughter, Virginia, and 2 years later, they married in a private ceremony in Tuscany. To this day, Bocelli credits Veronica with saving him, not just emotionally, but spiritually. But even with love by his side, tragedy wasn't finished with him yet. In recent years, Bocelli's health has been a growing concern. Touring the world, performing night after night, and maintaining his vocal strength has taken a toll on his body. There have been whispers about exhaustion, vocal strain, and the immense pressure of maintaining perfection at his age. Still, he pushes on, performing not for fame, but for faith. He once said, "My blindness has never stopped me. The only thing that can stop a person is fear. But can faith alone protect a man who's given everything to his art?" Faith through the darkness. For Andrea Bocelli, faith was never a performance, it was survival. Throughout his life, he's often said that music and faith are the two things that kept him alive. Every time tragedy struck, every time he lost someone he loved, every time the world grew silent around him, faith became the melody he could still hear. Growing up in a deeply Catholic family, Bocelli has always believed that his blindness was not a curse, but a calling. He once said, "If I could see, I might have been distracted by the world. Instead, I was forced to look inward, and that's where I found God." But even with that conviction, his faith was tested. There were times when the pressures of fame and personal loss made him question everything: his purpose, his health, even his music. Behind the curtain of elegance and grace, there were days when the weight of expectation was crushing. Traveling constantly, separated from family, and performing under the relentless gaze of millions, it took an emotional toll. There were moments, he later admitted, when the loneliness was unbearable. Even the stage, his sanctuary, could sometimes feel like a cage. During one particularly emotional concert in Italy, Andrea reportedly paused mid-performance, overcome by emotion while singing Ave Maria. He closed his eyes, though he could not see, and let tears fall freely as the orchestra played on. The crowd didn't cheer. They stood in silence, witnessing something raw, something human. That's what makes Bocelli different. He never hides behind perfection. His voice is powerful not because it's flawless, but because it carries his pain. Through every note, you can hear a man reaching for light in the middle of his own darkness. Still, even faith can only carry a person so far. As he grew older, Bocelli began confronting another painful reality, one that no amount of success or belief could protect him from. What happens when time itself becomes the greatest challenge of all? The fragility of a legend. Today, at 66 years old, Andrea Bocelli remains a global icon. But behind the fame and elegance lies the toll of decades spent giving everything to his art. Years of performing, traveling, and constant demand have worn on his body. Though he rarely speaks of it, those close to him say that exhaustion has become an ever-present shadow. The world still expects perfection from him. The perfect voice, the perfect grace, the perfect man. But behind that image is someone deeply human. His blindness means every performance, every trip, every routine task requires careful planning. Even simple things, like moving through a stage or hotel room, carry risks. Yet he does it all without complaint. He's also had to navigate the harsh scrutiny that comes with fame. Critics have accused him of commercializing opera, while others question his collaborations with pop stars. But Bocelli doesn't see boundaries in music, only connection. He once explained, "Music is universal. It doesn't belong to one world or another. My only goal is to touch hearts," and that's exactly what he's done. But his heart has carried a heavy weight. Losing his father in 2000 was one of the deepest pains of his life. His father, Alessandro, had been his biggest supporter, the man who stood by him when others doubted his dream. Andrea still says he feels his presence every time he performs. Even more recently, the world has seen glimpses of Andrea's vulnerability. During the global pandemic, his performance of Music for Hope in an empty Milan cathedral became one of the most watched musical events in history. Alone in a vast church, his voice echoed through the silence of a world in crisis. That performance wasn't just a concert, it was a prayer. It reminded millions that music can heal when words fail, and that even in isolation, we are never truly alone. Still, when the lights dim and the applause fades, Andrea returns to the quiet. And in that quiet, the man who once conquered the world faces his greatest truth, that even legends are not immune to sorrow, to time, or to loss. But what keeps him going? What drives a man who's already given so much to continue sharing his soul with the world? When you hear Andrea Bocelli sing, it's easy to think of perfection, the flawless voice, the poise, the elegance. But the truth behind that sound is far more human. It's pain, it's perseverance, it's faith woven into every note. At 66, Bocelli isn't just a performer. He's a survivor. A man who turned tragedy into art, blindness into vision, and loss into love. He's lost his sight. He's lost people he's loved. He's carried the burden of fame and the loneliness that often follows it. And yet, when he steps on stage, none of that bitterness shows. Instead, what you see and what you feel is peace. Andrea once said, "The greatest gift of music is that it allows you to speak to God without words." And maybe that's what his entire life has been. A conversation between pain and beauty, between suffering and salvation. He may never see the faces of the millions who adore him, but they see him, not just as a singer, but as a symbol of what it means to endure. Through every hardship, through every heartbreak, through every silence, Andrea Bocelli has shown the world that you don't need sight to have vision. You just need faith. And maybe that's the real lesson his story leaves behind. That life isn't defined by what's taken from you, but by what you choose to give back. So the next time you hear that unmistakable voice, the voice that feels like light breaking through darkness, remember the man behind it, the boy from Tuscany who lost his sight but found his purpose. Because Andrea Bocelli's tragedy isn't just heartbreaking, it's profoundly human. And through his pain, he gave us something that will never fade, the sound of hope. Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more untold stories of resilience and humanity. And always remember, even in the darkest moments, music, love, and faith can still light the way.